The dark story of the Beverly Hills mansion that witnessed the Menendez murders on a warm August evening in 1989. The white Mediterranean mansion at 722 North Elm Drive sat quietly beneath the California stars. Inside the cozy family room, a television flickered with the opening credits of a James Bond film. The Spy Who Loved Me. José Menendez, a 45-year-old entertainment executive with thick black hair and the build of a man who still played tennis regularly, dozed on the leather couch. Beside him, his wife Kitty, 47, a former beauty queen with blonde hair and green eyes, had also drifted into that peaceful half-sleep that comes after a Sunday dinner. The maid had the night off. The iron gates at the end of the semicircular driveway stood open. The elaborate security system was switched off. It was, by all appearances, just another quiet evening in one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive neighborhoods. But this would be the last peaceful moment these walls would ever know. Within the hour, the silence of that Sunday night would shatter with the roar of shotgun blasts. 14 shots would tear through the family room, leaving behind a scene so horrific that police would initially believe it was a mob hit, an execution carried out by professionals. The carnage would be discovered by the couple's own sons, 21-year-old Lyle and 18-year-old Eric, who would call 911 in hysterical tears, claiming they had come home to find their parents slaughtered. The mansion at 722 North Elm Drive would become the setting for one of the most sensational murder cases in American history. A case that would captivate a nation, launch the era of televised trials, and raise questions about wealth, abuse, and the dark secrets that can fester behind the most beautiful facades. But to understand what happened in that family room, we must first understand the house itself and the people who built their American dream within its walls. The story of 722 North Elm Drive begins not with murder, but with glamour. When this Mediterranean-style villa first rose from the earth in 1927, America was dancing through the roaring 20s, and Beverly Hills was establishing itself as the playground of Hollywood's elite. The mansion was designed in the style that defined Southern California luxury of that era, with its red tile roof, white stucco walls, and graceful arches that seemed to whisper of old Spain and new money. The house sprawled across more than 9,000 square feet of living space, featuring 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a swimming pool that caught the California sun like a mirror, and a tennis court where the wealthy could pretend their lives were nothing but leisure. A 2-story guest house offered privacy for visitors who required their own space, while manicured gardens surrounded the property like a living frame. The lot itself stretched across nearly half an acre, offering the kind of privacy that only the truly wealthy could afford in this coveted zip code. From the street, the mansion presented a face of perfect symmetry and classical beauty. Tall French windows let light pour into rooms with soaring ceilings. A dramatic circular staircase rose from the entrance foyer, its imported Italian limestone floors gleaming beneath crystal chandeliers. Every detail spoke of taste, refinement, and the kind of money that could afford to get things exactly right. In 1974, the house underwent a significant transformation under the ownership of real estate mogul Mark Slotkin, who rebuilt it to modern standards while preserving its vintage charm. A decade later, in 1984, another redesign brought the mansion fully into the contemporary era while maintaining its historical character. By the late 1980s, 722 North Elm Drive had earned its reputation as one of the most desirable addresses in Beverly Hills. But what truly elevated the mansion's status was its list of former residents. Before the Menendez family ever set foot inside, this house had been home to royalty, both literal and figurative. The legendary musician Prince had once lived within these walls, filling the rooms with his incomparable creativity. Elton John, another titan of pop music, had also called this address home, entertaining guests in the very rooms that would later become a crime scene. Even a Saudi prince had resided here, adding a touch of actual royal lineage to the mansion's pedigree. Theater legend Hal Prince had also passed through, leaving behind echoes of Broadway glamour. These were the ghosts of celebrity and success that haunted 722 North Elm Drive when Jose Menendez first laid eyes on it. For a man who had spent his entire life chasing the American dream, this mansion must have seemed like proof that he had finally caught it. Jose Enrique Menendez was born on May 6, 1944, in Havana, Cuba, into a world of relative privilege that would soon be torn away. His father was a well-known soccer player who owned an accounting firm. His mother was a celebrated swimmer, a star athlete who had been inducted into Cuba's Sports Hall of Fame. Though not among the island's elite, the Menendez family lived comfortably, and young Jose wanted for nothing. But in 1959, everything changed. Fidel Castro's revolution swept across Cuba, toppling the existing government and seizing the property of the wealthy and upper middle class. The world Jose knew collapsed around him. In 1960, at just 16 years old, he was sent to the United States alone, flying out of Cuba with his sister's fiancé, carrying nothing but his ambition and the memory of a comfortable life that no longer existed. He arrived in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, speaking almost no English, and moved into his cousin's attic. The boy who had once been pampered by adoring parents now found himself washing dishes at a Manhattan restaurant called 21 just to survive. But Jose Menendez was not the type to accept humble circumstances. He had inherited his mother's competitive fire and his father's head for numbers. He studied relentlessly, won an athletic scholarship for swimming, and enrolled at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. It was there, in a philosophy class, that he met Mary Louise Anderson, a communications major from Oak Lawn, Illinois, known to everyone as Kitty. She was 2 years older than him, stunningly beautiful, and came from a world as broken as his own, just in different ways. Kitty had grown up in a turbulent household where her father, Charles, was abusive toward her mother and the children. When her parents divorced while she was still young, Kitty became withdrawn and depressed, cutting off contact with the father she had come to despise. Despite her troubled past, Kitty carried herself with grace. In 1962, she won the Miss Oak Lawn beauty pageant, her outer beauty masking the pain she carried within. When she met Jose, she was immediately captivated by his intensity, his ambition, his absolute certainty that he would succeed. He was a bulldozer of determination, and she found herself swept up in his momentum. Jose's family objected to the match. They worried he was too young, just 19, and that Kitty came from a broken home. But Jose had been making his own decisions since he was 16. If he was old enough to flee a revolution and build a life from nothing, he declared, he was old enough to marry the woman he loved. On July 8, 1963, Jose and Kitty became husband and wife. The newlyweds moved to New York City, where Jose enrolled at Queens College to earn his degree in economics and accounting. Kitty took a job as an elementary school teacher, while Jose washed dishes and studied, burning with the conviction that poverty was merely a temporary condition he would soon leave behind. After graduating, he passed the CPA exam and began his climb up the corporate ladder with the same ferocity he had applied to his education. By the time their first son, Joseph Lyle, was born on January 10, 1968, in New York City, Jose had already begun his ascent. The family moved to New Jersey, where their second son, Eric Galen, was born on November 27, 1970, in Gloucester Township. Kitty quit teaching to become a full-time mother, devoting herself to raising the boys, while Jose devoted himself to building an empire. The family settled in Hopewell Township, New Jersey, where both boys attended the prestigious Princeton Day School. Jose's career trajectory was remarkable. He joined the consulting firm Coopers and Lybrand as an accountant, then moved to Hertz Corporation, where he became executive vice president of U.S. operations by the age of 35. The immigrant boy who had arrived with nothing was now one of the most powerful executives in corporate America. When RCA transferred Jose to its records division, he found his true calling. As chief operating officer of RCA Records, earning a salary of $500,000 annually, he expanded the company's Latin music catalog and helped sign legendary acts, including Duran Duran, the Eurythmics, and the Puerto Rican boy band Menudo. His attitude was relentless. He would take this company and make it number one, he declared, and few who knew him doubted he would try. But Jose's success came at a cost. Colleagues described him as brilliant but ruthless, diligent but impossible to like. He was overbearing, arrogant, rude to co-workers, and abrasive to subordinates. He drove himself without mercy and expected the same from everyone around him, especially his sons. He would work his children to the bone in athletics, particularly tennis, demanding excellence in everything they did. One manager remembered Jose once remarking, almost casually, that his oldest son was a bad seed. The words hung in the air like a prophecy. Jose was also an unfaithful husband. His affairs were flagrant, carried on with little attempt at discretion. Kitty, who had sacrificed her own ambitions to support his career and raise their children, was devastated. According to testimony that would later emerge, she became dependent on drugs and alcohol, battling depression and the humiliation of her husband's betrayals. She attempted suicide 3 times. Her psychologist would later describe her as obsessed with appearances, desperately trying to maintain the facade of a perfect family while everything crumbled behind closed doors. The family presented one face to the world while living another reality entirely. They were photographed together, always smiling, always impeccably dressed. Jose boasted of their closeness, their bond, their shared commitment to success. An executive at Jose's company told Vanity Fair that the Menendez family was extraordinarily close-knit. But those who looked closer saw something different. Those kids watched their mother become a doormat for their father, one family friend observed. The dysfunction ran deep, hidden beneath the gleaming surface of their perfect life. In 1986, Jose was passed over for the top position at RCA Records after General Electric acquired the company. Rather than accept defeat, he pivoted to a new opportunity, taking charge of the struggling home video division of Carolco Pictures, the studio behind Sylvester Stallone's Rambo films. The company, called International Video Entertainment, was hemorrhaging money, losing $20 million the year Jose arrived. Within 2 years, he had transformed it into a profitable enterprise, firing much of the staff and ruthlessly cutting costs. A merger with a Minnesota distributor created Live Entertainment, giving Jose his next empire to run. The position required a move to California, and the Menendez family relocated from Princeton to the Los Angeles area. They purchased an 8,000-square-foot mansion on nearly 14 acres in Calabasas, an affluent suburb in the San Fernando Valley that would later become famous as the home of the Kardashians. But Calabasas was not Beverly Hills. It was upper middle class, respectable, comfortable. It was not the statement Jose wanted to make. Kitty, meanwhile, was miserable. She considered the move from the East Coast devastating, torn from the life and friends she had known. The California sun could not warm the coldness that had settled into her marriage, and the sprawling Calabasas house felt more like a prison than a palace. She wanted to stay on the East Coast. Jose wanted to conquer the West. While renovations continued on the Calabasas property, Jose made his move. In October of 1988, he purchased the mansion at 722 North Elm Drive in Beverly Hills for $4 million. This was no mere house. This was a declaration. This was the immigrant dishwasher announcing to the world that he had arrived, that he belonged among the elite, that his name would be spoken in the same breath as the princes and rock stars who had lived here before him. The family moved into the Beverly Hills mansion, leaving the Calabasas property behind. Jose had finally claimed his place in the most exclusive zip code in America. His sons were growing into handsome young men. His wife presided over a home that had once housed royalty. At the time of his death, Jose's net worth was estimated at $14 million, the equivalent of nearly $37 million in today's currency. He had everything he had ever wanted. But something was terribly wrong behind the beautiful walls of 722 North Elm Drive. Lyle, the older son, had been suspended from Princeton University after being accused of plagiarizing a psychology paper. He was given the choice to leave voluntarily for a year or be expelled. The scandal embarrassed Jose, who had worked so hard to send his son to his own alma mater's rival, the pinnacle of Ivy League prestige. When Lyle and Eric were caught burglarizing neighbors' homes in Calabasas, Jose used his money and influence to shield them from consequences, but the incidents revealed a troubling pattern of behavior. The brothers would later claim that their father's abuse had been going on since childhood. They would testify to years of sexual, physical, and psychological torment at Jose's hands, with their mother sometimes participating or looking the other way. A cousin, Diane Vander Molen, would testify that when Lyle was young, he had confided in her that Jose was touching him inappropriately. She claimed she told Kitty, who sided with her husband and accused Lyle of lying, then sent him upstairs. The issue was never spoken of again. Whether these claims were true or fabricated would become the central question of the trials that followed. But what is certain is that by the summer of 1989, the Menendez family was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. Jose's relentless control, his affairs, his demands for perfection, Kitty's depression, her substance abuse, her desperate attempts to hold the family together, Lyle's academic failure and his simmering resentment, Eric's anxiety, his love of tennis and his secrets. All of it was building toward something that would shatter the mansion's peaceful facade forever. 2 days before the murders, on August 18th, Eric Menendez walked into a San Diego sporting goods store. Using fake identification belonging to Donovan Goodrow, a friend of Lyle's, he purchased 2 12-gauge Mossberg shotguns. The brothers later claimed they needed the weapons for protection, fearing their parents were planning to kill them to prevent the family's secrets from being exposed. Prosecutors would argue the purchase proved premeditation, that the brothers had carefully planned to murder their parents for the $14 million inheritance. On the evening of August 20th, 1989, the maid had the night off. Jose and Kitty were in the family room watching television, as they often did on Sunday evenings. The boys told their parents they were going out for the evening. Around 10 o'clock, a teenage girl who lived down the street was waiting outside her home for her boyfriend. She noticed a small car drive up and stop in front of the Menendez mansion. She saw 2 figures emerge. What happened next was reconstructed from evidence and testimony. The security system was off. The iron gates were open. Lyle and Eric entered through the French doors in the study and walked down the hallway toward the family room, where the blue light of the television screen provided the only illumination. Jose was dozing on the tan leather couch, sitting at the end nearest the door. The brothers opened fire. The first blast hit Jose in the back of the head, nearly killing him instantly. More shots followed, tearing into his body. Kitty, awakened by the explosions, tried to run. She made it only a few steps before she was shot in the leg, then fell. She crawled across the floor, desperately trying to escape, but one of her sons leaned over the coffee table, placed the shotgun against her left cheek, and fired. When it was over, Jose had been shot 6 times. Kitty had been shot 10 times, including 4 shots to the head that shattered her skull. The killers then gathered the spent shotgun shells from the spreading pools of blood, trying to remove evidence of their crime. They shot both parents near the knee, apparently to make the killings look like a mob execution, a professional hit targeting Jose for his business dealings. Lyle and Eric then drove away from the mansion, heading to Mulholland Drive. They dumped the spent shells and their bloody clothes at a gas station along the way. Then, they looped through the city, driving south to Century City to purchase movie tickets that would establish an alibi. They went to Santa Monica, claiming they were looking for a friend at the Taste of LA Food Festival, but never found him. By 11:47 that night, they were back at 722 North Elm Drive. Lyle called 911 at 11:47 p.m., his voice hysterical. "Someone killed my parents," he sobbed. When police arrived, they found the brothers weeping on the front lawn, apparently devastated by the discovery of their parents' bodies. The scene inside the family room was so gruesome that investigators immediately suspected a professional hit. Jose Menendez was a successful entertainment executive. Perhaps he had made enemies. Perhaps this was a mob killing, revenge for some business deal gone wrong. For months, the investigation went nowhere. The brothers maintained their story, claiming they had been out all evening and returned home to find the horror. They hired bodyguards, saying they feared the same killers would come after them next. Lyle told his bodyguards he believed it was either the Colombian cartel or the mob, the mafia. But his behavior seemed strange. He would jump out of limousines before they stopped, running into stores while his bodyguards scrambled to catch up. He seemed more interested in shopping than safety, and shop they did. Just 4 days after murdering their parents, Lyle and Eric began a spending spree that would eventually help convict them. Funded by their father's $650,000 life insurance policy, the brothers indulged every material desire they had ever harbored. Lyle purchased a $64,000 Porsche Carrera, replacing the red Alfa Romeo his parents had given him for graduation, a car he never liked. He bought 3 Rolex watches totaling $15,000 from a Beverly Hills jeweler, along with gold money clips. He spent $24,000 on stereo equipment in a single shopping trip. On September 4th, just 2 weeks after the murders, Lyle dismissed his bodyguards, telling them his uncle had contacted someone in the mob and arranged some type of deal. He never explained how a middle-aged businessman from a New Jersey suburb would go about contacting organized crime, or how such a deal could possibly be made. The brothers moved out of the mansion at 722 North Elm Drive, unable or unwilling to sleep in the house where their parents had died. They stayed in a series of expensive hotels, running up an $8,800 bill at the Bel Air Hotel that Jose's company paid. Eventually, they leased luxury condominiums on the water in Marina del Rey, giving themselves ample space for parties and movie nights with friends. Eric, who had been accepted to UCLA, decided not to attend. Instead, he hired a tennis coach at $60,000 a year, hoping to turn professional. He practiced up to 10 hours a day and flew to the Middle East to compete in tournaments. He also lost thousands of dollars gambling and invested $40,000 in a rock concert at the Palladium in Los Angeles that never happened. He bought a Rolex of his own and a Jeep Wrangler. Lyle returned to Princeton, not to attend classes, but to pursue business opportunities. He rented office space in a Princeton shopping mall for $3,000 a month and furnished it with expensive furniture for a venture he called Menendez Investment Enterprises. The office sat unused, a testament to Lyle's ability to create the proper setting without any substance behind it. He gathered friends from Princeton to serve as officers, but none of them had any business experience, and the enterprise never got off the ground. Lyle's most significant purchase was a restaurant in Princeton called Chuck's Spring Street Cafe, which he bought for $550,000 and renamed Mr. Buffalo's after its spicy wings. He imagined himself a restaurant mogul, though he had no experience in the food service industry. The day before his parents' funeral, Lyle dropped over $15,000 on Rolex watches. Sitting next to his father's secretary in the limousine home from the services, he showed off his new leather loafers and quipped, "Hey, Marzi, who said I could not fill my father's shoes?" Then he wondered aloud about obtaining tickets to the U.S. Open tennis tournament. Within 6 months, the brothers had spent approximately $700,000. Some estimates put the total closer to $1 million. Their extravagant spending drew attention and raised suspicions among everyone from police investigators to friends and family members. The brothers, who supposedly feared for their lives, seemed remarkably unconcerned about anything except spending their inheritance. But the brothers had a problem. When they met with executives at Live Entertainment to discuss assets they might receive from the company, they learned that the $5 million Keyman life insurance policy the company had purchased for Jose was invalid because he had failed to take the required physical examination. The $15 million policy that was valid would benefit the company, not the family. And when they discovered Jose's 1981 will, they learned that everything was indeed left to them, but there was far less than they expected. After mortgages and debts were deducted from the properties, after taxes were calculated, Lyle and Eric would each inherit only about $2 million. It was a fortune by normal standards, but nothing compared to the lifestyle they were already living. On October 31st, 1989, Halloween night, everything began to unravel. Eric Menendez called his therapist, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel, in desperate need of a session. He was agitated, barely able to contain himself. They met at Oziel's Bedford Drive office in Beverly Hills, but Eric was too anxious to stay inside. He asked if they could walk instead. The therapist agreed, and they left the office, walking through a nearby park as the California evening settled around them. During that walk, Eric began to break down. He talked about nightmares, about feeling suicidal, about the weight of something terrible pressing on his soul. He told Oziel that his father was a great man and that he wanted to write a book about him. And then, before they returned to the office, Eric made a confession that would change everything. "We did it." He told his therapist that he and his brother had murdered their parents. He described the planning, the execution, and the fabricated alibi. He revealed details that Oziel would later record in his notes, details that prosecutors would use to build their case. The confession spilled out of Eric like poison from a wound, the guilt he had been carrying for more than 2 months finally finding release. 3 days later, on November 2nd, both brothers came to Oziel's office. According to the therapist's later testimony, Lyle was furious that Eric had confessed. "I cannot believe you did this," he shouted. "I cannot believe you told him. I do not even have a brother now." The brothers discussed why they had killed their parents, though the reasons they gave would become a matter of dispute. Oziel would claim they spoke of ending their father's tyranny and putting their mother out of her misery. The brothers would later claim they spoke of abuse and fear. What Oziel did next would become deeply controversial. On December 11th, he recorded a session with the brothers, capturing their words on tape. He had his reasons, or so he claimed. He later testified that the brothers had threatened his life, warning him that they could kill him too if he revealed their secret. Whether out of fear or calculation, Oziel began building a record of what the Menendez brothers had told him. But Oziel was not the only one who knew. The therapist was having an affair with a woman named Judalon Smythe, who was also one of his patients. The relationship was a violation of professional ethics, a boundary crossed in ways that would later come back to haunt him. On the day of Eric's Halloween confession, Smythe was in or around Oziel's office. She claimed to have overheard Lyle's angry outburst about Eric's confession, and Oziel told her about the tapes. The secret sat dormant through the winter holidays, through the new year, through the early months of 1990. The brothers continued spending, continued pretending, continued living their new lives of freedom and excess. But in March of 1990, Oziel ended his relationship with Smythe, and the scorned woman made a decision that would change everything. She went to the police. On March 8, 1990, almost 7 months after the murders, police arrived at 722 North Elm Drive and arrested Lyle Menendez. He was leaving the mansion when they took him into custody, handcuffed him, and led him away. Eric was in Israel, competing in a tennis tournament with his expensive coach. 3 days later, having first flown to Miami where relatives advised him to go home, Eric returned to Los Angeles and surrendered at the airport. The brothers were booked into Men's Central Jail in downtown Los Angeles, 45 minutes and a world away from Beverly Hills. They were arraigned at Beverly Hills Municipal Court, each charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecution alleged they had killed their parents for money, for the $14 million inheritance that would let them live the lives of wealthy young men without the burden of their father's control. The case became a media sensation. Court TV, just 2 years old, broadcast the trial live, helping to popularize true crime as a genre and turning the Menendez brothers into household names. Americans gathered around their televisions to watch the drama unfold, captivated by the sight of 2 handsome young men in pastel sweaters who had allegedly murdered their parents with shotguns. The brothers' defense was led by Leslie Abramson, a fierce attorney who became as much a celebrity as her clients. She argued that Lyle and Eric had not killed for money but out of fear, that they had suffered a lifetime of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of their father, and sometimes their mother. They were terrified, Abramson claimed, that their parents were planning to kill them to prevent the exposure of family secrets. The killings were not premeditated murder, but an act of desperate self-defense. The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney Pamela Bozanich, painted a different picture. These were not abused children lashing out in terror. These were entitled young men who wanted their father's money without having to wait for it, who spent lavishly in the months after the murders, who showed no remorse for their actions. The abuse claims, the prosecution argued, were fabrications designed to win sympathy from a jury. The first trial, held in 1993, featured separate juries for each brother. Both juries heard testimony about the alleged abuse, about the years of torment the brothers claimed to have suffered. Witnesses testified about Jose's controlling behavior, his demands for perfection, his treatment of his family, Defense experts discussed the psychological impact of child abuse and how it could lead to the kind of desperate action the brothers had taken. But the juries also heard about the spending spree, about the Rolexes and the Porsche and the restaurant. They heard about Eric's confession to his therapist, about the tapes Oziel had made. What you did was you killed your parents and then began to spend their money, Bozanich challenged Lyle during cross-examination. Right? Well, that is something that happened, Lyle replied. But I do not think characterizing it that way is putting it in the right context. Both juries deadlocked, unable to reach a unanimous verdict. The prosecution had not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt, but neither had the defense convinced all 12 jurors that the brothers deserved acquittal. A mistrial was declared, and the brothers would have to face justice again. The second trial, held in 1995 and 1996, was different. A single jury heard evidence against both brothers. The judge, Stanley Weisberg, limited the abuse evidence that could be presented, ruling that while there was enough evidence to suggest Jose might have provoked his sons, there was not enough to indicate that Kitty had done the same. The defense's emotional arguments were curtailed, and the prosecution's focus on greed and premeditation was given fuller rein. This time, the jury was not sympathetic. On March 21, 1996, Lyle and Eric Menendez were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The brothers, who had lived in a Beverly Hills mansion, who had worn designer clothes and driven luxury cars, who had dreamed of tennis stardom and restaurant empires, were led away in shackles to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. The case has never stopped generating interest. In May of 2023, the brothers filed a habeas petition based on new evidence that had emerged in a documentary. Roy Rosello, a former member of the boy band Menudo, which Jose had signed to RCA Records, alleged that he had been sexually assaulted by Jose when he was a teenage member of the group. Rosello claimed that Menudo's manager brought him to Jose's home, where he was drugged and raped. The allegation, if true, would suggest that Jose's pattern of abuse extended beyond his own family. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office began investigating the claims. In 2024, District Attorney George Gascon announced that the brothers' convictions were being reviewed, and a hearing was scheduled for possible resentencing or a new trial. In May of 2025, a judge reduced their sentences from life without parole to 50 years to life, making them eligible for parole for the first time in decades. As of this recording, the fate of Lyle and Eric Menendez remains uncertain. They have served more than 35 years in prison, entering as young men in their early 20s and now approaching their late 50s. Both have married while incarcerated. Lyle first wed Anna Erickson, a former model, in 1996, but they divorced in 2001. In 2008, he married attorney Rebecca Sneed, though they announced their separation in late 2024. Eric married Tammy Menendez in 1999 after years of correspondence. If they are released, family members have said they would welcome the brothers into their homes. Cousins who testified on their behalf continue to support them, arguing that the abuse was real and that justice was not fully served. Others, including Kitty's brother Milton Anderson, remain opposed to any concession, insisting that the murders were motivated by pure greed and that the brothers deserve to remain imprisoned. And what of the mansion at 722 North Elm Drive? After the murders, the house that had once been a prize became a burden. The stigma of what had happened within its walls drove down its value significantly. The property that Jose Menendez had purchased for $4 million sold in 1991 for just over $3.6 million, nearly $1 million less than he had paid. In 1993, the house was purchased by William Link, the television writer who co-created Murder, She Wrote. There is a certain dark irony in the creator of a mystery series living in the scene of one of America's most notorious real-life murders. Link attempted to sell the mansion in 1997, listing it for $3.9 million. But after failing to attract a buyer, he removed the listing. In 2001, telecommunications executive Sam Delug purchased the property for $3.7 million. The house underwent renovations, its interior reportedly gutted to remove any trace of the violence that had occurred. The family room where Jose and Kitty died was transformed, its leather couch and coffee table replaced, its walls repainted, its very essence altered to escape the shadow of the past. But some shadows cannot be painted over. The mansion at 722 North Elm Drive became a fixture on true crime tours, a must-see stop for those fascinated by the darker side of Los Angeles history. Tour buses rolled past regularly, their guides pointing out the hedge-lined property where the Menendez brothers had killed their parents. Amateur sleuths posted videos of themselves driving by or walking up to the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous address. In December of 2023, the house returned to the market. Initially listed at nearly $20 million, it finally sold in March of 2024 for $17 million. The buyers were the Lahijani family, a wealthy Iranian family based in Beverly Hills. By that time, 722 North Elm Drive had become notorious for an entirely different reason. The Netflix series Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story, had premiered in September of 2024, bringing a new generation of true crime enthusiasts to the property's gates. Neighbors complained of the constant traffic, the tourists snapping photos, the true crime fans treating their quiet street like a theme park attraction. Construction barriers went up around the property as the new owners attempted to restore and renovate, though some said the plastic sheets blocking the view only made the house more mysterious, more alluring to the morbidly curious. Today, the mansion still stands on its half-acre lot, its Mediterranean facade largely unchanged from the day Jose Menendez first walked through its doors. The swimming pool still catches the California sun. The tennis court where the brothers once practiced their serves still waits for players. The guest house still offers privacy for visitors who will never come. But the family room where Jose and Kitty spent their final evening has been transformed beyond recognition. Real estate experts who have examined the property say there are no remnants of the crimes, that the room has been meticulously renovated to erase any physical evidence of what happened there. The house was meticulous, said one appraiser who visited. It was meticulously built, constructed, and maintained. Homes like that, people just do not like knocking down. And perhaps that is the strangest part of the story of 722 North Elm Drive. Unlike the apartment building where Jeffrey Dahmer committed his crimes, which was demolished to help a community heal, this mansion endures. It has changed hands multiple times, been renovated and restored, and continues to attract fascination precisely because of its history, not despite it. In the peculiar economics of stigmatized properties, infamy can eventually become value. The house where the Menendez brothers killed their parents, which once could not be sold, recently traded for $17 million. What does it mean when a crime scene becomes a commodity? When the walls that witnessed murder become worth more because of what they saw? When tourists pose for selfies in front of gates that once framed a family's destruction? Perhaps it speaks to our endless fascination with the darkness that can lurk behind beautiful facades. Jose Menendez built his American dream from nothing, rising from an immigrant dishwasher to a millionaire entertainment executive with a mansion in Beverly Hills. He achieved everything society told him to want, and yet something was terribly wrong in that house. Something that led his own sons to take his life and the life of their mother. The debate continues over what that something was. Were Lyle and Eric Menendez victims of horrific abuse who lashed out in terror, or cold-blooded killers who murdered for money? The answer may lie somewhere in between, in the complicated reality of a family that looked perfect on the outside, while something toxic festered within. The truth, as with so many families, may be that multiple things can be true at once, that abuse and greed and fear and rage can all coexist in the same hearts, driving people to actions that cannot be undone. 722 North Elm Drive keeps its secrets behind trimmed hedges and Mediterranean arches. The house that witnessed murder still stands in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in America, its value rising even as its history grows more distant. New families will live there, raise children there, watch television in rooms that have been repainted and redesigned to forget what happened on that August night in 1989. But the walls remember. They have to. Because somewhere in those 9,000 square feet of living space, in the bones of a house built in 1927 and rebuilt and renovated through the decades, the echoes of that evening linger. The flicker of a television screen, the sound of footsteps in the hallway, the roar of shotguns shattering the Sunday quiet. The mansion at 722 North Elm Drive stands as a monument to the American dream and its shadow, to the heights of ambition and the depths to which families can fall. It is a reminder that the most beautiful facades can hide the ugliest truths, that money cannot buy happiness or safety or love, and that the homes we build to shelter our families can become the settings for their destruction. José Menendez wanted a house that would declare to the world that he had made it, that the immigrant boy from Cuba had conquered America. He got his wish, but the house that was supposed to be his greatest triumph became the scene of his greatest failure, the place where his sons took his life and their mothers, the walls that would forever be associated with murder rather than success. Today, the Menendez brothers wait in prison, hoping that changing attitudes toward child abuse and trauma might finally bring them freedom after more than 3 decades. The mansion waits too, behind its gates, watching the tourists come and go, keeping its secrets as it has kept them for more than 35 years. The story of 722 North Elm Drive is not over. It may never be over, because as long as the house stands, as long as people remember what happened there, as long as the questions of guilt and innocence and abuse and greed remain unanswered, this mansion will continue to haunt the American imagination. A beautiful house in a perfect neighborhood, hiding a story that is anything but perfect. In the end, the mansion is just walls and windows, stone and tile, rooms that have held princes and murderers and everyone in between. But those walls have witnessed something that cannot be unseen, something that changed lives and ended lives and continues to fascinate us decades later. 722 North Elm Drive is more than an address. It is a mirror, reflecting back to us our endless fascination with wealth and violence, with beautiful people who do terrible things, with the American dream gone terribly wrong. And like all the best horror stories, it remains unsettling because it is true. The legacy of what happened at 722 North Elm Drive extends far beyond the property lines of that half-acre lot. The Menendez case helped define an era of true crime fascination that continues to this day. It was one of the first trials to be broadcast live on television, allowing millions of Americans to watch the proceedings unfold in real time. Court TV built its reputation on cases like this one, and the public appetite for courtroom drama has only grown in the decades since. The trial also sparked important conversations about child abuse, particularly the sexual abuse of boys, which had long been a taboo subject. Whether or not the jury believed the brothers' claims of abuse, the testimony they provided forced the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about what can happen behind closed doors in even the wealthiest, most respectable-seeming families. Therapists and child advocates spoke of the Menendez effect, a surge in disclosures from male victims who had previously been too ashamed to speak. The case raised questions about justice and mercy that still resonate today. If the brothers were truly abused as they claimed, does that justify what they did? Can murder ever be self-defense against parents? How do we balance the horror of what they did with the horror of what may have been done to them? These are questions without easy answers, and they continue to be debated in law schools, psychology departments, and living rooms across America. For the neighbors on North Elm Drive, life eventually returned to something like normal. The tour buses still come, but less frequently than in the early years. The curious still pause at the gates, but most have never heard of the Menendez brothers, know nothing of the tragedy that unfolded behind those walls. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges of memory. The Beverly Hills Flats, where the mansion sits, remains one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Properties here are not just homes but investments, status symbols, generational assets. The stigma that once attached to 722 North Elm Drive has faded, replaced by the peculiar cachet that comes with infamy. In the strange calculus of celebrity real estate, having once belonged to murderers is not so different from having once belonged to movie stars. The children who grew up on this street in the late 1980s are now in their 40s, with children of their own. Some remember that August night, the sound of sirens, the sight of police cars blocking the street. Others have only heard the stories, passed down like local folklore. For them, the Menendez house is just another landmark, a piece of neighborhood history no different from the home where some celebrity once lived, or the corner where some long-forgotten scandal occurred. But for those who lived through it, who watched the trial on television, who followed every twist and turn of the case, 722 North Elm Drive will always be something more. It will always be the place where two brothers did the unthinkable, where a family's secrets exploded into violence, where the American dream revealed its nightmare underside. The house stands today as it has stood for nearly a century, its Mediterranean facade unchanged, its rooms renovated and renewed. New memories are being made within its walls, new lives being lived. Perhaps that is the most hopeful part of this story, the idea that even a place marked by such tragedy can be reclaimed, can become home again. But the past is never truly gone. It lives in the cracks between the floorboards, in the shadows that gather in corners at dusk, in the weight of history that no amount of renovation can fully lift. 722. North Elm Drive will always carry the memory of what happened there, will always be the Menendez house to those who know its story. And as long as people are fascinated by wealth and violence, by beautiful families hiding ugly secrets, by the thin line between success and destruction, this house will continue to draw our attention. We look at its elegant facade, and we wonder what really goes on behind closed doors. We look at its perfect symmetry, and we remember that nothing is ever as perfect as it seems. The mansion at 722 North Elm Drive is, in the end, just a house, but it is also a story, and that story is far from over. As long as the walls stand, as long as people remember, As long as we remain fascinated by the darkness that can lurk within even the most gilded lives, the house will continue to hold its place in the American imagination. Some houses are built to shelter families. Some become monuments to their destruction. 722. North Elm Drive became both a testament to ambition and tragedy, to dreams achieved and shattered in a single act of violence that still echoes across the decades. The story ends where it began, with a beautiful house on a quiet street, its windows dark against the California night, keeping its secrets behind Mediterranean walls and manicured hedges, waiting for the next chapter to be written.